My name is Victor Hale. For 16 years, I ran engineering at Carson Tech. I wasn't the loudest, I wasn't the flashiest. I just made sure everything worked. When I started, we had one rented rack in a data center downtown. No redundancy, no backups, no cloud. The office microwave drew more power than our first production server. I built the stack from scratch. No templates, no shortcuts. I automated processes no one thought were possible, wrote custom code that reduced manual workflows. By 70%, I didn't need a title upgrade. I didn't ask for stock. I stayed out of politics. Every quarter they hit their numbers. Every year they expanded. And every time something failed, a payment gateway, a supplier's API, a data loss scare, I was the one they called. Not once did I let the system collapse. But apparently, stability doesn't look good on a slide deck. When the company changed hands, when the board brought in outside leadership, that's when the shift started. No one said it out loud, but you could feel it. The people who built things were being replaced by people who talked about building things. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then came Graham. My name is Victor Hale. I'm not the kind of person people write articles about. I didn't build a brand. I didn't speak at conferences. I didn't climb the ladder by stepping over people. I just worked. I joined Carson Tech when it was 6 people in a cramped office over a laundromat. The carpet always smelled like bleach. The fridge door didn't close properly. The network was a mess. There were passwords on sticky notes. The server was a desktop under someone's desk. But I saw potential, not in the business plan, not in the pitch deck, in the gaps, in what they didn't know they needed yet. So I built one piece at a time: firewall rules, internal tools, a custom CMS, load balancing, cloud migration. Over 16 years, I turned that pile of cables and chaos into a system that ran clean, quietly. I wasn't flashy about it. I never talked about what I was doing unless someone asked, and they rarely did. Things just worked. Payments processed. Backups ran on schedule. Clients uploaded files without hitting size limits. When the lights flickered or the billing processor stalled or someone deleted the wrong table, I fixed it before anyone in a suit even knew. People started calling me the guy who didn't talk much but always knew what to do. That was fine by me. I wasn't there to be noticed. I was there to make sure nobody else got blamed when something broke. That kind of work builds trust, or it used to. Didn't know it then, but all that quiet reliability was putting a target on my back. Especially with the new leadership, they didn't ask what the system could do. They asked how much it cost. His name was Graham Vickers. He wore thin-framed glasses, always spoke with his hands, and introduced himself to the company with a 10-minute slideshow that used the word future 13 times. I counted. Graham was brought in by the board after a 2-day off-site they called a strategic realignment. He came from a logistics tech firm on the West Coast, where his biggest project had been leading the sunsetting of an old warehouse database. He said it like it was a badge of honor. On his first day, he asked me for a systems diagram. I gave him a high-level architecture sketch and told him I'd walk him through it when he had time. He didn't schedule anything. Instead, I started seeing him in meetings I wasn't invited to, with people I used to supervise. A few days later, I got an email asking for access to certain code repositories, not from Graham, from someone named Evan. I didn't recognize the name. HR confirmed he was one of 3 new hires, junior engineers with new laptops, no history with the system, and the kind of confidence that only comes from not knowing how many things can go wrong. I asked Graham about it. He said we were realigning engineering resources for better elasticity. I asked what that meant. He smiled and said, "You'll see." Then he walked off to his next meeting. A week later, I was asked to provide documentation handoff materials for modules I'd personally maintained for years. I asked who would be reviewing them. They didn't say. I noticed my calendar started looking lighter. architecture reviews, removed budget check-ins, cancelled, weekly infrastructure sync, reassigned. I didn't say anything, but I knew you don't need an official memo when the pattern's that clear. First, they say they want to learn how the system works. Then, they start asking who else can run it. And finally, they act like it runs itself. That's when you know you're not part of the next quarter's plan. They started calling my work legacy systems, like it was a liability, like the fact that it hadn't failed was somehow the problem, like building something that worked for more than 6 months was a weakness. Graham had no interest in what the system did, only in what it looked like to investors. The newer, the shinier, the cheaper, the better. He never asked how many layers of failover were embedded in that legacy stack. He never asked how many times we averted a crisis because the right script ran at the right time. He just nodded at graphs, and I just kept working, but in the back of my mind, I'd already started thinking about what I'd take with me when they finally said it out loud. It was a Thursday, 10 a.m. I got a calendar invite from Diane in HR. No title, no agenda, just a room number. It wasn't my first time seeing that format. You don't need subject lines when everyone already knows what the meeting is. I walked in. Graham was already seated. Diane sat next to him with a folder in front of her, hands folded just a little too neatly. No coffee, no water, no small talk. Just a screen with my employee file open. Graham didn't look up at first. When he did, it was with the expression of someone about to read from a script. He started with the usual phrases. This isn't about performance. You've done important work here. This is a business decision. He said the company was entering a new phase, that my position no longer aligned with the long-term structure. Then he paused. Like he expected me to say something, I didn't, so he continued. We've determined that reallocating your compensation toward building out a more flexible engineering structure would serve the company's evolving needs. That's how he said it, word for word. Then he looked up, finally making eye contact. To be completely transparent, we can bring in 3 engineers for what we pay you annually. Junior talent, more adaptable. He smiled a little when he said it, like he was proud of the math. Diane opened the folder and slid a document across the table. You'll receive 2 months severance, she said, plus accrued vacation and benefits through the end of the month. I looked at the paper, but I didn't touch it. Thank you, I said. Graham blinked. That's all. I nodded. Yes. I think he wanted more, maybe even expected it. Anger, accusation, threats, something he could call resistance. But I didn't give him that. I'd already given this place enough. I stood. Diane said I had the rest of the day to collect my things. I told her it wouldn't take that long. I walked out without shaking hands. My desk was in the west wing of the 4th floor. It used to be a shared workspace. Over the years, people left, got promoted, reassigned, burned out, moved on. I stayed. I liked the quiet. I had 2 monitors, a keyboard I brought from home, and a file drawer with printouts no one else cared about, a labeled cable bag, a copy of a systems audit from 2012, a backup router I never had to use. I took everything I wanted. It fit into 1 cardboard box. The rest I left. As I walked through the hallway, a few people looked up. No one said anything. A few nodded. One guy cleared his throat like he was going to say something, then looked away. That's the thing about layoffs. They're not contagious, but they still make people flinch. Nobody wants to be the one who talks to the person walking out with the box. I got to the elevator, waited, took the long ride down to the lobby. Security didn't stop me. I stepped out into the parking lot and opened the back of my truck, set the box down gently, closed the tailgate, sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, no music, no GPS, no calls, just the sound of tires moving across wet pavement in the distance. I stared at the windshield until the fog from my own breath started to fade. Then I turned the key and drove home. At the house, my wife met me at the door. She didn't ask for details, just set down a glass of water and asked if I wanted to sit outside for a while. We have a deck that looks out over Lake Ontario. When the sun's low and the water's still, the sky turns. A color I've never been able to describe properly. I sat there watching it fade. My glass was still half full when she stepped out and sat beside me. "What now?" she asked. I waited a few seconds, then said, "Something will turn up." I meant it, not as a plan, just a fact, because I knew something they didn't. I hadn't just built the system. I had built the system so well that it worked without needing constant attention. No one had asked how. No one had taken the time to understand what held it together. And now they'd have to figure that out on their own. The first few days were quiet. I didn't send any emails. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't start looking for jobs. I let the silence settle. I'd gotten used to noise, alerts, status reports, Monday check-ins, Friday wrap-ups. Now there was nothing. I walked my property, tightened a loose board on the fence, updated a few scripts on my home NAS, reorganized the garage. On day 4, I turned off the auto-refresh on my inbox. Then I left the phone on the counter and went outside. It wasn't that I didn't care. It's that I'd already done my part. I'd spent years making sure things worked. I'd warned them about what would happen if things weren't documented. I'd written proposals for internal training. They all got pushed. Next quarter. No budget. We'll circle back. So I stopped asking. Now it was their turn to ask, and they would, because something was bound to go wrong. Not because I made it fail, but because the only person who knew where the real fault lines were was no longer picking up the phone. Think the first call came on the 7th day. It was short. "Graham, hey Victor, small thing. Some errors in the tenant portal, just some instability. Hoping you could give us a quick callback. Nothing urgent." I'd listened to the message, then played it again, then deleted it. A few hours later, another voicemail, this time from one of the junior engineers, Evan. "Hey, I've got some questions about the maintenance ticket flow. There's this recursive call that keeps crashing. Think it might be circular, but I'm not sure where the exit condition is." I remembered that function. I'd written it 8 years ago to patch over a known gap in the old vendor's scheduling API. There was no way he'd find the answer just by looking at it. Not unless he knew the workaround I'd hard-coded into a config file that wasn't labeled for public use, which he didn't. Third message came that night, from Diane in HR, calm, polite, formal. "Victor, we were wondering if you might consider a short consulting arrangement to assist with a few issues the team is encountering. Of course, compensation will be discussed." I let that one sit in my inbox overnight. The next morning, I poured myself coffee, sat at the kitchen table, watched the lake, and replied with one sentence, $300 per hour, 4-hour minimum, nothing more. I clicked send, then muted my phone, then went outside. The system I built didn't crash all at once. That's not how it was designed. It failed slowly. First, one of the automation queues got stuck. Then the backup verification flags started showing inconsistencies. Then, without warning, the payment processor threw a timeout error that propagated upstream. None of these things are fatal on their own, but together, with no one who knew where the manual resets lived, they started to spread. And still, I didn't answer. On the second day, Alan texted me. He was the only person still there I trusted. I'd hired him 10 years ago, trained him from the ground up. "Everything's breaking," he wrote. "They're scrambling. Graham's flipping. Out." I didn't reply. Another message followed. "No maintenance tickets are processing. Users are calling. The CTO's blaming us." I took a sip of coffee, set my phone face down. I wasn't enjoying it. I want to be clear about that. This wasn't some plan. I didn't sabotage anything, but they didn't listen when I told them it needed documentation. They didn't budget for training. They didn't want to pay for redundancy. And now, the system was giving them a live demonstration of what happens when you make decisions based only on what fits on a PowerPoint slide. That night, I received an email from Diane. She offered to increase my consulting rate. "The team is facing a few unexpected challenges," she said. "Your insight would be incredibly helpful in getting things back on track." I read it twice, then archived it. The next morning I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through. "Graham." His voice sounded different, tighter, faster. "Victor, we've got a situation with the client. Access module. The new guys can't trace the architecture. It's not behaving the way the specs suggest. We need your help. I'm authorizing whatever rate you quoted. Just give us a few hours." There was a pause. Then a second message. "Victor, please." I stood by the window and listened to it. Then I deleted it. Alan texted me again. "You're in their heads now. They can't fix it. They're trying, but it's like watching someone defuse a bomb with oven mitts." Still, I waited. The system would hold out a little longer. That's how I'd built it, but not forever. The fourth message came from Diane again. This time the tone was different, less polished. "Victor, I hope you're well. Look, we're willing to formalize a consulting contract starting immediately. It would be remote. Short-term, high compensation. We've put together a figure that reflects your seniority and experience. The team needs direction. Please let us know." Attached was a PDF. I didn't open it right away. I left it sitting there. I went outside, took a walk down to the lake. Wind was sharp that morning. Barely any light on the water. When I came back in, I poured a fresh cup of coffee, sat down, opened the file. $300 per hour, 4-hour minimum, flexible engagement. I leaned back in the chair, looked out the window. My wife walked in, saw the screen, and raised an eyebrow. "They finally broke," she said. I nodded. "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "They're starting to understand what I was worth. That's all." I didn't respond to Diane's email. I didn't need to. That was the offer they gave someone they'd called too expensive. Now they were willing to pay me more than I'd ever made there, just to get a piece of what they let go. Not a full solution, not a rebuild, just 4 hours of guidance, and I still wasn't going to give it to them, because by now it wasn't just about code anymore. It was about memory, context, years of decisions, patches, exceptions, workarounds, all tied to choices made long ago and barely written down, and they'd thrown that away in a single meeting. Now they were reaching into the dark, hoping I'd hand them a flashlight. I turned off my email for the rest of the day, and I waited not for the money, not for an apology, for something else, something that was already on its way. I just didn't know how soon it would show up. The fourth message came from Diane again. This time, the tone was different, less polished. "Victor, I hope you're well. Look, we're willing to formalize a consulting contract starting immediately. It would be remote, short-term, high compensation. We've put together a figure that reflects your seniority and experience. The team needs direction. Please let us know." Attached was a PDF. I didn't open it right away. I left it sitting there. I went outside, took a walk down to the lake. Wind was sharp that morning. Barely any light on the water. When I came back in, I poured a fresh cup of coffee, sat down, opened the file. $300 per hour, 4-hour minimum, flexible engagement. I leaned back in the chair, looked out the window. My wife walked in, saw the screen, and raised an eyebrow. "They finally broke," she said. I nodded. "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "They're starting to understand what I was worth. That's all." I didn't respond to Diane's email. I didn't need to. That was the offer they gave someone they'd called too expensive. Now they were willing to pay me more than I'd ever made there, just to get a piece of what they let go. Not a full solution, not a rebuild, just 4 hours of guidance, and I still wasn't going to give it to them, because by now it wasn't just about code anymore. It was about memory, context, years of decisions, patches, exceptions, workarounds, all tied to choices, made long ago and barely written down, and they'd thrown that away in a single meeting. Now they were reaching into the dark, hoping I'd hand them a flashlight. I turned off my email for the rest of the day, and I waited. Not for the money, not for an apology, for something else, something that was already on its way. I just didn't know how soon it would show up. By the time I'd been at Devlin Systems for 2 weeks, the messages from Carson Tech had stopped being polite. I wasn't supposed to see most of them, but Alan kept me in the loop. He hadn't quit yet, but he'd already stopped caring about what Graham wanted. "Victor," he said, "it's bad." I asked how bad. He sent me a screenshot. The tenant database had duplicated several thousand records due to a failed attempt to rewrite the backup integration without understanding the fallback triggers I'd built. Time zones were off. Payment. Confirmations weren't syncing. Invoices went out with the wrong names. Support queues were flooded. Clients were threatening to leave. "Graham's blaming the system," Alan said. He told the board the code was too personalized. "That. You made it intentionally hard to maintain." I didn't laugh. I just stared at the message. That was the moment I realized something. They weren't just losing control of the system. They were trying to shift the narrative, rewrite the story so that the problem was never the decision to cut corners. The problem, apparently, was that I had done too much. That week I heard through Alan that Carson Tech lost Westbrook Properties, their largest client. Westbrook represented 30% of their revenue. One error in tenant invoicing had been the last straw. They cited system instability and unresolved integration failures. Then came the press release. It was buried at the bottom of a trade news cycle, but it was there. Carson Tech had initiated leadership changes to better align with customer expectations. Translation: Graham was out. A day later, Alan sent me another message. "You're not going to believe this. They've hired a recovery firm, external consultants, specialized in legacy system triage." I asked who. He told me. I'd worked with that firm before. Good people, but they were expensive and slow, and without the full picture they'd never get the system back to what it was. Carson Tech was running out of time, and they knew it. It was a Thursday again, almost 2 months to the day since I'd been walked out. My phone rang around 8:30 a.m. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail, then another call. Same number. This time I picked up. "Victor." The voice was slower now, hoarse, less practiced. "It's Graham." He paused, like I was supposed to say something. I didn't. "We've lost access to 3 months of payment data. The consultants can't reconstruct it. Westbrook's terminated. Another client's preparing litigation." I waited. He kept talking. "Look, I was wrong. We need your help. The board has authorized whatever rate you name. You don't even have to come in. Just tell them how to fix it." I stepped into my office at Devlin, sat down, looked out the window. "I'm employed now," I said. "Exclusive contract. I can't help you." He swallowed into the phone. I could hear it. "We'll double what they're paying. 2 days of your time. That's it. It's not about the money." Another silence. Then the line changed. His voice hardened. "You know there could be legal implications. If we find out you made things difficult on purpose, IP complications, non-compete clauses." I stopped him there. "The code belongs to Carson Tech. Every line, as written in my contract. What I took with me was experience, not files." I paused. "If your lawyers need confirmation, they can speak with mine." There was no reply, just a quiet breath, half caught in his throat. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You knew this would happen." Not a question, a statement. I waited again, then answered, "No. I just knew what I'd built. And I knew what it took to keep it running. I tried to explain it many times. You called that resistance." I ended the call, and this time I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel satisfaction, I just felt done. The acquisition closed on a Monday. Devlin Systems bought Carson Tech for less than a quarter of what it had been valued at before I left. Lawrence walked into my office that morning. "It's official," he said. "You're in charge of the technical transition. Whatever stays, whatever goes, it's your call." I nodded. Then we drove to the building I used to walk into every morning. Same elevator. Same fourth floor, same carpet, but this time I wasn't there to answer for anything. I was there to decide what would carry forward and what wouldn't. Some of the old staff were still around. A few glanced up as I passed. One nodded. One didn't make eye contact. One mouthed, "Thank you." We reached the server room. The machines were still running. The system I'd built, the one they said was too old, too custom, was still holding the company together, even as everything else had failed. Lawrence asked if I wanted to go inside. I shook my head. "We'll be migrating it anyway." In the conference room, I gave a short briefing to the remaining staff. I didn't mention the past. I didn't mention the decisions that led to the collapse. I talked about timelines, access, resources. I told them no one would lose their job during the transition. There was a long silence after that. Then someone clapped, quietly. A few joined in. I didn't stop it, but I didn't need it either. When I walked back through the lobby that afternoon, I passed the old nameplate by the door. The new one was already installed. Devlin Integrated Systems, and beneath it, Infrastructure Division, Lead V, Hale. I didn't ask for more money. I didn't ask for a new title. What I asked for was a training program. A team dedicated to teaching engineers how to build systems that last. Systems that don't need babysitting. Systems that don't fall apart the second the person who built them walks away. Lawrence approved it without hesitation. We launch next quarter. Sometimes people think revenge means taking something back. I don't. I think real revenge is when the thing they thought was disposable becomes the standard. A few weeks ago, I got a message from Justin, the son of Carson Tech's founder. He said his father asked about me, said he was glad I was back. In a way. Then Justin wrote one sentence I haven't stopped thinking about. Turns out value isn't always visible until it's gone. I sat with that for a while, then I got up, went back to work because that's what I do. I build things that outlast the people who stop believing in them, and I don't need to be thanked for that. The system works. That's enough. If you've ever been overlooked, replaced, or told you were no longer worth the cost, you already know this story, and maybe you're still sitting on what they called too much. If this resonated with you, stay. There are more stories like this, and they need to be told the right way. Subscribe, share it with someone who's still keeping things running in silence, and if you've got your own story, the comments are open.